Syl had disliked me for many years and even wore white to my wedding, criticizing everything I did. When I went to see my sick mother, Syl called CPS in an attempt to take my daughter, revealing her desire to gain custody of her. I've been with my husband Harry for almost 3 years, and I genuinely love his family. His mother is kind and caring, and his father has always enjoyed our conversations, making me feel part of the family quickly. When Harry and I were initially dating, we had a brief breakup due to some misunderstandings. However, when we reconciled, his father was the most excited for us, happy that we had resolved our issues. The only person in Harry's family who hasn't warmed up to me is his sister Sarah. Sarah, Harry's older sister, has made things awkward since I started dating him. I've heard that relationships can be complicated when boyfriends have sisters, often involving some power struggles, but I never fully understood it until now. Despite Sarah's coldness, I didn't let it affect me much, especially since I felt welcomed by everyone else in the family. Harry eventually shared that Sarah's protectiveness stemmed from their childhood. Their mother frequently battled illness and was often hospitalized, which meant their father was too distracted by her health to focus on anything else. Harry's older sister always felt a deep sense of responsibility for him. She would ensure he finished his homework and even cooked for him. She often told him she was like a second mother and acted as such, even going so far as to forbid him from hanging out with girls. He had to ask for her permission before going on dates. She frequently called to check on him and interfered in his relationships, often clashing with his ex-girlfriends. This led many of them to break up with Harry, unable to cope with his sister's intrusive behavior. As they grew older and their mother's health improved, Harry began to assert his independence, no longer seeking his sister's approval for his actions. Despite her pleas for his company, Harry preferred to spend his time partying with friends. Frustrated, Sarah installed a tracking app on his phone to monitor his whereabouts. Once, she even confronted him at a party, yelling at him for not inviting her, which embarrassed him in front of his friends. This confrontation revealed the tracking app and led to a significant argument. When Harry shared this with their parents, they reprimanded Sarah. When Harry first told me about these incidents, I considered ending our relationship to escape the chaos. It was all so far from normal. Yet my love for him was strong, and I couldn't blame him for his sister's actions, recognizing that he too was a victim. I chose to stay but remained cautious around Sarah. In Harry's family, the tradition of gathering for family dinners every couple of weeks and celebrating every holiday was deeply ingrained and carried on without fail. We take turns hosting family dinners at each other's homes, and it's during these gatherings that I mostly interact with Sarah since she rarely calls me otherwise. I always try to be polite, but she often makes comments that seem harmless but are actually hurtful. For instance, one evening after dinner, while I was washing dishes and my boyfriend and his father were clearing the table, Sarah joined me at the sink. She casually remarked, "You should clean all these dishes to burn off the extra calories from dinner." I usually don't mind doing the dishes alone, but her comment hurt me because it felt like she was shaming me for my weight, even though I'm not overweight. I responded by suggesting she could help too, since it looked like she had put on some weight over the holidays. This made Sarah very upset, and she started yelling at me for being insensitive. When Mill, Phil, and Harry came to see what was happening, she accused me of calling her fat. I never actually called her fat, so I denied her accusations. She left the kitchen angrily when no one supported her. Later, she texted me demanding an apology, but I refused, believing I hadn't said anything that warranted an apology. Since then, Sarah's attitude towards me has worsened. She's become ruder when we're alone. At a family event, as she announced her wedding plans with her then-boyfriend Neil, she asked us to keep our Christmas schedules open for her wedding date. I decided to ignore Sarah's comment about her wedding, as I hadn't planned to attend unless I was free that day. Later, while we were all chatting after dinner, Sarah suddenly asked me if I was still planning to visit my family that year. Usually, my family and I go on a trip together every year since we all live far apart and rarely see each other. I wasn't sure why Sarah brought this up, as she rarely spoke to me, but I calmly told her that yes, I was planning to visit my family at the end of the year. She then asked if I was going to skip her wedding. I explained that attending her wedding wasn't a problem, but I needed to know the date well in advance to plan around my family trip since I only saw them once a year. However, Sarah wasn't happy with this. She raised her voice, accusing me of being selfish and saying she had never liked me because I always did what I wanted without considering others. I tried to clarify that I just needed to know the date to make a commitment, but she continued to accuse me of being ungrateful for all her family had done for me. Her tone grew louder, making everyone uncomfortable. My mother-in-law stepped in, reminding Sarah that I hadn't refused her invitation outright, and it wasn't fair to expect me to cancel my long-standing family plans, especially since they met monthly throughout the year. Sarah was still upset but dropped the issue. Later, Harry told me that what I did was wrong, and that I should cancel my family plans for Sarah's wedding. I reminded him that I never asked him to skip any family events for me, so he shouldn't expect me to attend his sister's wedding when she clearly disliked me so much. Harry argued that my actions had made Sarah dislike me, and that I needed to resolve the issue to prevent it from affecting our relationship. Feeling pressured and wanting to avoid more conflict, I sent Sarah a text apologizing for any misunderstanding and canceled my family plans. It was a tough decision, but I hoped it would help smooth things over with my partner's family. However, surprisingly, Sarah's wedding didn't happen that Christmas. Despite all the drama, her marriage plans fell through due to financial issues. She ended up having a court marriage the following year with a small reception in her backyard. I was so upset that she caused all that drama, and I had canceled my plans for nothing, so I didn't attend her reception. Harry wanted me to go, but I refused because I had enough of Sarah's drama. I also stopped attending the frequent family dinners every month. I only went for special holidays. Otherwise, I would ask Harry to go alone. He would go, but he often came back saying he was bored without me. Over time, he also began skipping many family events. It wasn't just because of me, but after we moved in together, his priorities naturally changed. When his sister called to ask why he wasn't at dinners or events, he would say he was tired or too busy with work. However, I started to hear from some of my husband's cousins that Sarah had been telling everyone that I was to blame for all this. Sarah claimed I was preventing Harry from seeing his family, which wasn't true at all. I asked Harry to clear up the misunderstanding with his sister because I didn't want to be wrongly blamed. He agreed, and at the next family event, he decided to talk to Sarah about it. I wasn't there for their conversation, but I heard later that it turned into a big argument. Sarah accused me of being abusive towards Harry and said she had noticed narcissistic traits in me over the years. She claimed I was intentionally keeping Harry away from his family, making me out to be manipulative and controlling. When Harry defended me, saying I always encouraged him to go to family events, Sarah claimed I was just being manipulative and he couldn't see it. She insulted me, questioned my character, and said Harry deserved someone better. Despite Harry trying to calm things down and defend our relationship, Sarah got even angrier. She accused him of being blind in love, not seeing how I was supposedly using him for his money and looks. Harry was really upset by the confrontation and came home saying he was done with his sister for good. He blocked her for months and didn't let their parents, Mill and Phil, make him feel guilty about not talking to her. Things changed when we heard from relatives that Sarah was pregnant. Mill and Phil organized an intervention for Harry, asking him to fix his relationship with his sister before she had her baby. Harry felt he had no choice but to agree, and after that, he met with his sister a few times for lunch to talk things through. They managed to get along, but she never apologized to me for the things she said. When I mentioned this to Harry, he asked me to just let it go since she was going to be a mother soon and he hoped she would mature. I hoped things would change after Sarah had her son Van, but her neediness only grew. She started calling Harry frequently, asking him to babysit. She explained that she and her husband needed to work to support the baby, so she felt Harry should help by taking care of his nephew. Harry was nervous about taking care of an infant by himself and would often check with me first. Sometimes we would babysit together, but Sarah's requests for help became more frequent and demanding. She needed help when she had errands, appointments, or just needed a break, and she started to rely heavily on Harry, almost as if he was Van's father. But it wasn't just Harry. I was involved too, and I didn't want to give up all my free time to babysit. It became exhausting, so eventually I began to say no to babysitting. When I declined, Harry would also refuse, which frustrated Sarah. I want to make it clear that I never stopped Harry from taking care of his nephew. In fact, I encouraged him to take more responsibility on his own, without depending on me. However, Harry felt he wasn't experienced enough to take care of Van alone. Sarah probably blamed me for this too. She used guilt-tripping tactics, telling Harry how much it would mean to Van or others if he could help out. Sarah started asking Harry if we were free on certain dates without explaining why, trying to trap us into committing to plans. If Harry said we were free, she would then mention she had plans with friends and needed us to babysit her son, Van. When Harry and I were planning our wedding, Sarah never congratulated me. However, at a family dinner, she demanded that we pay for a nanny to watch her son during the wedding so she could drink and have fun without worrying about her child. Harry refused, telling her it wasn't our responsibility to pay for her son's childcare. He suggested she could arrange for her husband's family to look after Van if she didn't want to bring him. Sarah said she didn't trust her husband's family enough to leave her son with them. When her husband Neil heard this, he argued with her, saying it was absurd and his parents would be happy to look after Van for the night. During a chat about my wedding dress with my mother-in-law, I showed her some pictures of the beautiful dress I had chosen, which was really my dream dress. However, Sarah made a remark about how spending so much on a wedding dress was a waste of money and bragged about how smart she had been to have a simple court wedding. My mother-in-law gently pointed out that Sarah had chosen a courthouse wedding because of her financial situation. Sarah became defensive, insisting she could have chosen a different venue, but opted for a simpler wedding to save her husband's money. She then implied that not every woman was willing to make such sacrifices. I calmly responded that Harry and I were both contributing to our wedding costs, showing that I was not solely depending on my husband. This response seemed to upset her even more, and she sulked for the rest of the evening with a childish frown. At my bachelorette party in Las Vegas, my friends and I had a fantastic time, and we posted many photos online. However, Sarah later accused me to my husband, claiming that I must have been unfaithful because she believed no respectable woman would party so much before her wedding, even though her brother had also celebrated his bachelor party. During our rehearsal dinner, Sarah pointed out my wild bachelorette party and suggested I could have opted for a quieter celebration locally. I just laughed off her remarks and explained that I enjoyed my trip to Vegas, and since it was my own money, I saw no issue with enjoying some pre-wedding fun. On the morning of our wedding, as I was getting ready, my mother-in-law came to me, looking concerned. She told me Sarah had sent her a photo of her dress, which was off-white and almost looked like a wedding dress. Seeing the picture, I felt very angry. My mother-in-law explained that she had asked Sarah not to wear it, but Sarah had responded that she was already on her way and couldn't change. I couldn't understand why someone would knowingly choose to wear an off-white dress to someone else's wedding. Frustrated, I called Harry and asked him to deal with the situation since I didn't want to confront Sarah on our wedding day. Harry and his father quickly handled it. His dad even had to buy a new dress for Sarah, insisting she change before entering our wedding venue. I was relieved they resolved it so fast, but I couldn't forgive Sarah for her actions. At the reception, she accused me of being a controlling bride and said I was jealous for making her change dresses. I told her I was tired of her manipulative behavior and wasn't going to put up with her games anymore. Harry also defended me, criticizing his sister for her insensitivity on our wedding day. He mentioned how embarrassing it would have been if she had worn that off-white dress to the wedding. Surprised by Harry's firmness, Sarah started to cry and eventually left the reception. Before leaving, her husband Neil came up to me to apologize sincerely. He mentioned he had also told Sarah not to wear the dress, but she insisted. This confirmed my suspicion that she had intended to cause trouble on my wedding day. From then on, my relationship with Sarah remained tense. However, things began to change when my daughter Mary was born. Sarah's attitude softened when she visited us in the hospital, and she even apologized. She showed real care and interest in Mary, which made Harry and his family happy. It seemed like Sarah was finally maturing, which was a relief since I was tired of the constant conflict. Over time, I encouraged Mary to spend time with Sarah's son, as they are cousins, and I want them to have a close relationship. Sarah and I have started spending time together so that our kids can play. We talk about our lives and our husbands during these times. Sarah mentioned she's been trying to have another child because she really wants a daughter to dress up and take shopping. While I understand her desire for a specific gender, I always remind her that the gender of her baby isn't something she can control and that she shouldn't stress about it. I've noticed that Sarah often hugs and kisses my daughter at family gatherings, which makes my daughter uncomfortable, and she sometimes starts crying. I didn't think much of it until recently. My mother recently fell ill and had to be hospitalized, leaving my father to take care of her by himself. Harry, my in-laws, and I planned a trip to visit her. They would stay for 4 days, but I planned to stay 2 weeks to help my father and be there for my mother. Harry would be looking after our daughter while I was away. I initially wanted to bring her along, but since we'd be at the hospital all day, I didn't want to expose her to germs or have her get bored. Harry suggested asking his sister to help look after our daughter for the 4 days he'd be with me. Surprisingly, Sarah agreed enthusiastically. Before we left, I gave her a list of my daughter's allergies, and she assured me everything would be handled well. Upon arriving at our destination and while waiting to collect our luggage, I received a call from an unknown number. Thinking it might be the hospital, I answered, but it turned out to be Child Protective Services, CPS. They asked about our whereabouts and why we had left our daughter with someone else. I explained that we were visiting my ill mother and that we had arranged for our daughter to stay with her aunt Sarah. To my shock, CPS told me that Sarah had filed a complaint accusing me of abandoning my child and was planning to fight for custody. Panicked, I tried to explain that this wasn't true and that Sarah, my husband's sister, had agreed to look after our child while we visited my sick mother. I handed the phone to my husband, hoping he could clear up the confusion. Despite our attempts to explain, it became clear that one of us needed to go back immediately to deal with the allegations in person. Phil and Mill, witnessing our panic, tried to call Sarah, but she wouldn't answer their calls. Eventually, my husband had to book a costly return flight on short notice. His parents and I stayed behind to visit my mother since we were already there. The whole situation was very upsetting, and I couldn't relax until my husband called to say he had our daughter Mary, and she was safe. I broke down crying, stressed by my mother's hospitalization and now this betrayal by my sister-in-law. Harry's parents and I have repeatedly asked him why Sarah would file such a false report. He has promised to address everything once we get back. However, it's hard to stay calm, so I've decided to return with Phil and Mill in 4 days. I'm extremely angry and frustrated, and I can't help but feel furious towards Sarah. Despite my husband's reassurances, I feel like he's not taking the situation seriously enough, adding to my confusion and frustration. Is it wrong to think what Sarah did is unforgivable? Update 1. It's been 4 days since my last update, and I wanted to update that I am finally going back home today. I don't want to give away any medical details, but my mother is slowly recovering even though she is still hospitalized. Once I have confirmed that Mary is doing well, I may consider returning again, depending on how things unfold with my family. I'll be sure to provide another update soon. Also want to address concerns regarding my husband's capability to care for our child. While he was initially tasked with babysitting his nephew when he was younger due to his sister's demands, he has since matured into a wonderful father. I have complete confidence in his ability to take care of our daughter. He cares for her attentively and treats her with the utmost love and care. Kindly don't blame my husband for this fiasco of why my CIL called the CPS. For the last 4 days, Phil and Mill have tried everything to get in touch with her and her husband, but no one is answering their calls. I don't know if that is fishy or not, but I just wanted to update that here. Update 2. I know it's been a week since I updated, and all of you have been messaging me and commenting on my post like crazy, asking me for an update. I want you all to calm down and stop imagining the worst case scenario. First of all, my husband and kid are perfectly safe. Nothing has happened to my child, and she is her playful self as usual. Later, when we all sat down together to talk, my husband Harry explained the events that had unfolded. He revealed to us that the reason we had been unable to get in touch with her was because she was in a psychiatric hospital. We were taken aback, and Mill looked concerned as Harry went on to explain more. Apparently, Sarah has become obsessed with getting a daughter, which I kind of already knew, but what I didn't know was that on the day we left Mary in her care, she saw it as an opportunity to fulfill her desire to have a daughter. Sarah planned on taking us to court and fighting for custody so she could take away our daughter. She did tell her plans to Neil, who didn't believe her at first, and thought it was a joke or something because no one in their right mind would even think something like this. However, she did file the complaint, and then Harry had to fly back home to clarify the situation with CPS. After hearing his explanation and verifying all his details, CPS firmly warned Sarah against filing false complaints in the future. Later, Harry confronted her also, as he could not believe that his own sister could have done something like this to us. It was then that Sarah started justifying her actions, telling him how she had watched me and my daughter for months, and apparently I was not a good mother since I didn't kiss or hug my kid enough. She told Harry that every child loves to be held, but that whenever she held my daughter Mary, she would start to cry or get uncomfortable, which made Sarah believe that I was perhaps abusing my daughter in private. Harry got pissed hearing this and told his sister that her behavior wasn't normal at all and that she was starting to get too obsessed with our daughter. Sarah kept repeating how she deserved to have our daughter, so Harry pointed out how ridiculous her assumptions were and how wrong she was to call CPS on her own family without any proof. Eventually, after hours and hours of talk, Sarah broke down, admitting to Harry that she was not in the right state of mind and that she needed help. She said how she fantasizes about stealing our kid away from us since she has always wanted a daughter. Even her husband Neil was shocked to learn about the extent of her struggles. In the end, Harry and Neil had a heartfelt conversation, and Neil packed a bag for Sarah so he could drive her to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. This is why she has been unavailable for the past few days. Neil apologized to my father-in-law and mother-in-law for not picking up their calls, expressing his desire to clarify everything in person. Since then, Van has been staying with us for the time being. I know Neil works long hours and I don't want Van to be alone in the house, so we've welcomed him into our home to ensure he has company and support during this challenging time. Now that everything has been explained, I can understand why my sister-in-law called CPS and why my husband waited until now to explain everything. It's a lot to process, and honestly, I'm at a loss for words myself. Update 3. Wow, my post has gone viral. I listened to all of your advice and I have talked to my husband as well. He has agreed to take a restraining order against my sister even if she is getting treated for her mental health. I am honestly scared of leaving my child behind and visiting my parents next week. However, my husband and in-laws have assured me that they are going to make sure that nothing happens to my child. I also feel immensely guilty that I didn't spend enough time with my parents, especially given my mother's illness. Hopefully this time, I can spend some quality time with my father and be there to support and watch over my mother as she continues her recovery journey.